da ni wrth ein boddau bod David Banner MBE yma I sôn chydig bach am y byd gemau fideo. Well, we are thrilled to have David Banner MBE, also known as Dai, here to tell us more about the gaming world. Felly, croeso Dai.
Thanks, Alex. Actually, I was more interested in hearing about Alex, but we'll carry on. Yeah, so good evening, everybody. So, yeah, so my name's David Banner, right? But I'm known as Dai. My wife hates it. But when I started in the games industry 25 years ago, there was loads of Daves, and I lived in London. So I just said, oh, just call me Dai. So in the games industry, I'm known as Dai, and it's sort of stuck. So even though there's lots of Dais in Wales in the games industry, I am the only Dai, right? And unless when I go to Asia, then there's a few more then, right? So I'm managing director of Wales Interactive, but my background, for the last 25 years, I've been a professional video games maker and designer. So I started as an artist, a games designer, and now I've become a producer, a writer, a director, and now an entrepreneur, a successful games entrepreneur. So in that time, I've been fortunate enough to win quite a few awards. The BAFTA win this year was our 100th award nomination, and we won quite a few of those 100 nominations. And then personally, I've won quite a few personal awards, including the St David's Award a couple of years ago, which is the highest award a Welsh citizen can have off Welsh Government, essentially, for enterprise. And of course, the MBE. So I'll just tell you a little quick anecdote about this, right? So you have a little person, so you're in Buckingham Palace for 3 hours, and you're terrified. It's like the worst. I was more nervous than my wedding day that day, right? And they tell you what to do and where to stand and how to sort of greet Prince William. So, bag of nerves, walked up, turned right, and he steps forward. And he's a big guy, and I'm a small guy. He doesn't stand on a step like Prince Charles. And he has a little private conversation with you. And they told you he will have a conversation with you for a few minutes, right? And so I didn't think of anything to say because I was just so nervous. So he stepped forward. He pins the medal on. He said, "So, David," he goes, "video games," he says to me, right? And his father had actually come to our studio, because we're based in Sony, a few years earlier, right? Just by sheer fluke, right? And I said to him, "Oh, funny thing is," I said, in this little private conversation, "your father came to our studio." And he leans forward and he whispers in my ear, "He hates video games." And I said, "I know," I said, because when I showed him one of mine, he said, "Ew, that's quite terrifying." So I did a really bad impression of Prince Charles, Prince William, in that scene there. So that's all I could think of. And even though I wasn't mic'd up, my wife, who was in the front row, goes, when she met me after, she goes, "You didn't do an impression of Prince Charles, did you?" I said, "I panicked," I said, so I did. So anyway, so Wales Interactive, I founded with my business partner, Richard Pring. So essentially, games companies tend to be a programmer and an artist. He's the programmer, I'm the artist, you know. And then together we've gone on a journey over the last 7 years, making a successful games company that not only makes games, publishes games, and sells them in 196 countries around the world now, right? So we're based in Pencoed, you know, obviously that Mecca, Silicon Valley of South Wales. And of course, we don't do it on our own. We've got a really young, dynamic team, which we're proud that we've sort of nurtured. They're all new talent that we've made, like a cutting-edge team that can compete with the rest of the world, really. So I'm going to show you some of the titles we've done over the last few years. Oh, this is winning the BAFTA for Time Carnage last month. And then we'll go back to just Alex asking questions. So we haven't really made one title. We've made about 30 in the last few years. So Major Scares, our latest horror game, real-time horror game, which is due out next year. So this one's based on a Welsh folk song. Late Shift, it's one of our interactive movie titles. In fact, it's the most successful in the games industry in the world. And it's a movie where you make your own decisions and ultimately change the ending of your film and your path through the film. Time Carnage is the VR game you might have played outside now. This picked up the BAFTA Company Award last month. It's a VR shooter. This is all done in-house with my in-house team. So So we do a lot of interactive movie titles, all different budgets. So this is called The Shapeshifting Detective, and it's a murder mystery essentially where you try to find the killer. Done not twice, hopefully you should have played outside as well, which is a VR horror title. This one's actually in the Welsh language as well. So as well as 3D and film games, our portfolio is quite diverse. So this is a 2D platform that we also work with. We collaborated on this one with a company from Berlin, actually. And this is another murder mystery. So we've got a husband and wife team. We actually were massive fans of murder mystery. We work on them, and they are the right person for these titles. Soul Axiom was featured on stands all over the world, on the Nintendo stand, the Xbox in San Francisco, Tokyo, and it's the one that really sort of broke us internationally. And The Bunker's the first ever interactive movie that we made. It sort of got us into that sort of space, which we'll talk about in a bit in more detail. So rather than me talk, it's easier to show what we do because it's a very visual thing. So you can see that's not everything we've made in the last 7 years, but it's a good cross-section. And I'll pass back to Alex now.
It's really interesting. I'm definitely going to be playing some of those games after seeing that trailer. Thanks, Dai. Right then, well, to begin with, I think I'd just like to go back to the very beginning, and I want to know, what is your earliest gaming memory?
Oh my God. So I'm proper old, so it'd be Pong, actually, mine would have been. So,
Pong.
Really, I was born in the 70s, but it was really the 80s, so it's been the Spectrum. And funny thing is, on LinkedIn, Daley Thompson's is my first connection, and I used to play Daley Thompson's decathlon, so that's really... But yeah, so the Spectrum, I suppose, and the Commodore 64, and then there was the Amiga computer, which where really my passion started to grow.
I love the Amiga. Yeah, I had so many Amiga games played.
Yeah. Oh yeah, well, even though I'm a professional artist, so I trained, I went to art college, and I basically could draw. That was my core skill. So while I was in art college, computers started to become the things that we know now. They weren't green screens. They were like, it was basically the first art programs. So on the Amiga was an art program called Deluxe Paint, which I'd bought myself. It was on the front of a magazine for free. And because I was an artist, I just, in my spare time, learnt to do digital art, pixel art as such. And sort of the passion grew from there then.
Oh, it's great. Such a great console for learning, wasn't it, as well as playing? So what game or games would you say have inspired you the most? And what was it that made you think, oh, you know what, I want to make games?
Right. Yeah, so I obviously, when growing up, being a video games designer wasn't really a vocation, so it wasn't something that was tangible. I probably want to be a vet or something, So, but I knew I wanted to be an artist. That's the earliest thing I can remember. I knew that I had a talent for drawing, and the one bit of advice I had off one of the teachers: if you're good at something, pursue it. So I knew I wasn't just an also-ran. I knew I was good at creating stuff and having ideas, different mediums. So. On that journey of becoming an artist, I was, I used to play lots and lots of video games, and obviously they became more and more art-based. From programmers who didn't need artists making little pixel art, they became more and more visual. And I started to think, there must be somebody must pay somebody to do the artwork for these games. So that's when I started to dabble as part of my college. My school, my college, and then my university courses. But because there was no games courses, I was sort of in between things. So what I did was dabble outside, but I was never a programmer. I was just basically animating simple pixel art and making pixel artwork, essentially.
So like with the lack of expertise around at that time, it didn't put you off at all? You didn't think, oh, I can't do it? You just carried on?
Well, when I graduated, so I graduated with a first-class honours degree in graphic design from University in Leicester. And for me, it was like the first time I'd moved away from the Rhondda. So it was a big, scary city anyway. And, it's quite a multicultural city. So the first time I was thrown into it, it was about life lessons and whatever. But on that journey through my degree, you get to your third year, and I remember somebody saying, "Oh, I'm applying for jobs already," and this is like the start of the third year, and they go, "What are you going to do?" And I was going, I'm doing a graphic design course. What are you going to do? What are you going to be? And I still didn't really know. And the games that I'd taken with me on my journeys in boxes, cardboard boxes then, were still around me in my Leicester house. And I sort of, that thing, I thought, again, somebody must make these. So I essentially wrote off to the back of the addresses on the boxes, and somebody wrote back. And then I was invited, so that one of the games that I had on my desk was called James Pond Robocod, right? Classic.
Do
you remember that one, yeah? So I thought, this is a big thing, for people, advice for people, it's initiative, right? Nobody told me to write off to that. I know it's even more connected now with email and stuff, but the point being is that I had the initiative to think, right, naively, turn around the back of the box, an address on you, I'm going to write to this. So I didn't just write to one, I wrote off to many then. And then they wrote back, they were called Millennium then, I think they're called Frontier now, but they were called Millennium Software then. They wrote back, and I was still in this was January, so I was still in my degree. And they invited me to Cambridge, and I went into my first game studio. Oh. And it's probably no bigger than the one we've actually got now, right? But I went in there, and I was looking at people doing pixel art, and there's people programming. But, like I said, I'm an artist. I'm not a programmer. It's all about the visuals. So the art director was taking me around, showing me stuff. He goes, "Oh, we really like the stuff you've done." The stuff I was sending wasn't my graphic design degree stuff, because that was irrelevant. It was the stuff I'd done in my own time over, 6 years, essentially, from the age of 16 to 21, 22, So he sat me down and basically said, "We really like you. We're looking for, I'm looking for a new junior, and we think you could be that." And I was like, "Oh my God, this is amazing, And then I got to meet the guy that designed James Pond Robocod, and I was like, "Oh my God, So I physically met people, which I knew there were human beings that did this, and they weren't that far away. They were in Cambridge, which is still, from a guy who still lives in the Rhondda, it's still a bit too far, but I mean, I can stretch to Cambridge. So essentially, they offered me a job, but the caveat was I had to drop my course. And I'm not going to lie, right? There's no way I was going to be in Leicester for 3 years and not get a degree, right? It was like, it's something they can never take away from me. I've got a first-class honours degree. So I turned it down because I thought at that time, even though you can imagine, it's like literally throwing away a gold nugget, was that if I can make one person, if that, that art director said nice things about me, and I thought, if I can make one person write back, I can make another person write back. Then fast forward, I was on the dole in the Rhondda for 6 months. Thinking, what have you done? You should not have done the degree. You should have just taken the... And again, looked at the boxes of games that I hadn't written to, and thought, right, you can either sit here and feel sorry for yourself, or you're going to have to try to persuade somebody to invite you in again. So I made a show reel, which on videotape, which will age me again, right? And as a struggling person with no money, living in the Rhondda Valley, we all know about the Rhondda Valley. It's a beautiful place, right? But I'm literally in the 80s, the Thatcher years, the food banks and all that, right? So I'm from that sort of background. So it was always about, us against them and trying to win against adversity. But anyway, so what happened then was, I made a little show reel, which was way too long. So when I advise on show reels now, short and sharp, mine was probably like a holiday video. It went on forever, right? I showed them everything that I have ever done. I think it was 7 minutes long. But because it was the 3-hour tapes, which I used to buy in Hyper Value, and 3-hour tapes are really heavy, right? So, and I didn't have enough money to post all these. So I would spool out 2 hours and 60 minutes. So it's all in my house. My mother and father were putting out bags of spooled videotape, and then I'd post off these. And then essentially, a few more people wrote back, and an agent who's a Welsh guy living for Aardvark Swift, a new consultancy thing, and he said, I think I can help you get a job. And he got me a first couple of interviews. I was going to take the first one I had in Macclesfield, and he said, "No, David," he says, "don't." I'm putting on a Welsh accent because he had a he had a real different Welsh accent to me, very deliberate, more Terry Griffiths, he was, right? And he persuaded, and he would phone me on a landline, how old, you know, with no emails or anything. He literally would phone my house phone, which was my mother and father's phone, and my mother would go, David, is somebody on you about games or something? Is an aardvark or something? And then I'd go and he'd say, David, I got you interviewing Macclesfield. I went there, got the job, going to take it because I've been unemployed for 6 months. No, David, don't take it. And this is on the phone. I got you another interview in London. I said, oh, Stephen, I said, I'm just going to take it because I might not get another chance. Like, and then he goes, no, you really should take this, David. Have you got a suit? He said. No, I said, I haven't got a suit. Get a suit, he goes, and I'll organise this interview in London. So as it happens, Burberry's used to make, was based in Treorchy, right, where I'm from. And obviously in London, they're like 600 quid suits. And I went up in the factory shop and gone for 25 quid. This never ever fitted me, you know, one size small in them days, not small. Like, you know, it's like, so I went up. So I went to London. It was a baking hot day, I always remember. And I had a massive portfolio and I had a suit on. And I was on the tube in London and I was going to Putney. And I went in for this interview, and as I walked through the door, and I'm dressed like an accountant, right? The guy who interviewed me had a pink Mohican. And it was like a pierced nose. So it was like the weirdest interview ever. But anyway, that company ended up giving me a job, and that company became Eidos Interactive. So I was there for the birth of Tomb Raider. But the company was called Dormark, and I literally, it's the size of the company that I own now, and overnight it became this massive thing. So I went straight into this roller coaster of this tiny company. This became this huge I can't even say huge thing overnight, right?
Wow, that's amazing. And the rest is history.
It is, yeah, quite literally.
Well, turning to one of your games now, we saw it in the trailer, Late Shift. It's been included in a list of the best FMV games you really should play. And if anybody doesn't know what FMV is, it's a full motion video. So can you tell us a bit about what it's like to make FMV games? And do you think they're increasing in demand?
Yeah, so can I just quickly show, let me flick through here, because I have a little clip just so you can see what we're talking about, if you haven't seen what the interactive movie type is.
Look at me. You can't not decide, okay? You have to do something. Let's go! Go!
Right, so interactive movies. So FMV we call them. Now I go to we got invited to go to Netflix in June. So when we go there, we call them interactive movies. So it depends what hat I got on and what industry I'm in. So in the games industry, we call them FMV, but in film, it's interactive movies, right? So, and even some of the things we make are FMV and some are interactive movies, and I can explain why in a bit. But yeah, so we essentially make games that are filmed essentially, but they have game technology running, game logic, and they tell stories, right? So the difference is the medium's not 3D, real-time Unity assets. The medium is film, right? But they are planned like non-linear games, essentially, right? And non-linear scripts. And then through that, like the Choose Your Own Adventure books back, in the 80s, the audience member gets to make decisions and change your journey through the story. It's not just as simple as well as on-off decisions. They're more sophisticated than that, so they accumulate. So there's certain scenes you might never see, and obviously in Late Shift there's 7 endings, right? So Late Shift was actually written and directed by a very clever guy called Tobias Weber, and I met him in San Francisco. So it was actually not... I got to flick forward in my timeline. So we were just doing this, which was our first interactive movie, right? I'll try to talk over this, right? It's called The Bunker. So we were in San Francisco showing this. And essentially, it was the first thing that we'd made that was filmed, that was a game. is our experiment with another company called Splendid Interactive. And this one's very different to Late Shift. It is filmed, but it's more of a point-and-click adventure. So mechanically, Late Shift is a fluid. It moves constantly, and you make decisions. In this one, this is more like a point-and-click game, essentially, right? But filmed. That's enough of that, right? I'll look back to the Late Shift, right? So essentially then, we had met basically in a Cologne party in Germany, drunk at 2 o'clock in the morning. I'd met a hairdresser, and then we got talking, and we ended up making the bunker. And then after, this is not, in a lie. This is what happens, right? So this hairdresser had an idea for making the bunker, and that's why he was in Cologne. And we were in Cologne showing Sol Axiom. And then we drunkenly said, oh yeah, we can do that. This sounds cool, you're a hairdresser, we make games. So his friend was a writer called Alan Plenderleith, and they were all fathers who met in taking their kids to school, basically. One was a cameraman, one was a writer, one was a hairdresser, right? And the hairdresser, you'll kill me for this, Simon will, right? Hairstylist. He was a hairstylist for film. So the three of them teamed up, and Simon sort of became the producer, really. And he's the guy that met in that drunken party. We ended up getting involved in the project and going on the journey together and making the bunker. So once we'd finished the bunker, we were going around the world promoting it, FMV, interactive, and sort of testing the water. And when we were in San Francisco, there was only one other, we saw one other clip of another thing that some guy was trying to make called Tobias Weber, which was Late Shift. So we naturally smashed together, what are you doing, what are you doing? So we sort of teamed up then to take Late Shift, build in the tech that we were building in, the sort of the things like achievements and the game logic that was driving our titles into his film, right? And then the rest is history with that. And it ended up being the most successful. It was featured on Xbox Games Pass. If Bandersnatch is the defining moment for Netflix and Interactive, Late Shift is for the games industry. So obviously Late Shift existed 2 years before Bandersnatch. So that's sort of how weirdly we got into making interactive film or FMV. But the reality is, because we're games designers, we make so many different games with different mediums. To us, film was just another medium to explore and try to find out how, a lot of our games just tell stories anyway, so film obviously is a medium for that. So that's sort of how, in a weird way, we get from a hairdresser to Tobias and Late Shift, really. And it is as mad as that, the story is. I could tell you an entire hour just on that, really.
Sounds fascinating. And you can ask more about that later when we're playing games. But talking about teams and how you work with random people, I mentioned earlier about when I went over to California to meet the World of Warcraft sound and design team. And that team is massive. And I mean, as you can imagine, it has to be, because it's a game that's been running for 15 years and it's still expanding, developing. They had a sound team, they had resident composers, whereas another person I went to meet, Ian Dallas from Giant Sparrow, he made What Remains of Edith Finch, great game. And when we met him, he is a one-man band, and he just hot desks in the city of LA, and then he just brings people in when he needs them. And Tim Schafer, for example, as well, who head of Double Fine, when he made Grim Fandango, one of my favourite games, he said that he brought in an illustrator who had had no experience whatsoever in video games, because he wanted the game to have a different look. So I'm just wondering, how do you work? Do you do that? Would you bring in different people, or do you go back to the same core creatives for your projects?
So, because we work on so many different titles, so we start as an indie games developer, making a game, finishing a game, making a game, finishing a game. The sophistication now is I'm working on 6 games at the moment, right? For instance, the complex interactive movie, that's out in March, I'm working on at the moment, as well as Made to Scare. On Made to Scare, I am the writer with Rich. On Complex, I'm not the writer. We've got an Emmy Award-winning writer from Handmaid's Tale working on that. So for different projects, we have different things, and then we overlap the skills of the team. So we've got a core team of 12. They're a full-time team. You saw the picture of them up there. And so without anybody else, we can make video games, right? But we are not filmmakers. So we tend to, if we plan films, we work them with experienced production companies. Because they are in abundance in Wales, we're tapping into something, rather than fighting against that, we thought, let's work with. So for us, as a publisher, without our development hat on, we can publish lots of games a year, but we couldn't make as many games on our own as we could publish. So the obvious thing for us was to collaborate. And in the video games industry, we're very fortunate that me and Rich, we literally go around the world and we meet with what you call the small indie developers. So there's a real family that grows through the struggle of trying to, sell your game. So that is unlike most industries where it's work for hire and you're competing against each other. So there's more of a camaraderie, and we will share contacts. We will, we meet up and we actually like each other, even though technically we are making things that compete with each other, right? So what happens in there? Natural collaborations happen, and that's through us just going to different events around the world. And then sometimes, the reason we got into publishing was that there was a developer next to us on a Nintendo stand. And he goes, "How are you on PlayStation?" Because we were on PlayStation. And we said, he couldn't get the development kits because it's invite only. It's not like you can just say, "I want to be PlayStation." They've got to like what you do. So through us, we said, well, we'll do it for you, because we are an official PlayStation developer. So we teamed up and we helped him get his game multi-platform. So in that way, we enabled, but in a different sort of business model to the traditional publishers that are established. So it's more about us understanding the indie, because we are an indie, and cash flow and the boring things of even like getting something to marketing. And actually then most people who do that literally have begged, borrowed and stolen, haven't got any money at that time. So we understand that, because we are that company as well. So we help them then try to become self-sufficient like we have. So we are not financed by anything, because of the millions of games we've sold of our own. That helps perpetuate this to create a new label, which is about, it's about the smaller guy. Do you know what I mean? It's like an indie record label, but essentially now it's for games,
And you've just returned from the Busan Film Festival, and you were just talking there about when you meet random people and you just hit it off and start to collaborate. I mean, what was that experience like of being at the Busan Film Festival, and are going to international events like that really important for finding new collaborations?
Yeah. So our Busan was brilliant. Obviously, I had to do a talk there, so the interpreter was working overtime with my accent, that's for sure. So honestly, it's the first film festival we've been to, and in fact, we were invited. It wouldn't be on our radar. They're fans of the... So basically, our interactive movies, 50% of our sales come from Asia. So we've got quite a following in Asia for some of the titles I've shown there, right? So that led to them inviting us. And then, like I said, we normally go to gaming events, so it's a different gene pool to film. So it was really flattering that we got to talk over there, really. And what they wanted us to talk about was not just the films, but how we make them, right? So I'm just going to click this and I can talk over this while I'm doing it, right? So, because we've made so many of these interactive films over the years, we've worked with not just us as writers, we work with other writers as well. And the issue we always had was trying to capture what the writer did. Whereas most people, we get sent a linear script that a writer really, with the complex, we got sent a really sort of slick linear script, which the story was great, but then we have to advise the writer how to change this into an interactive thing. The rules of being a games designer means that stuff you throw away as a linear writer, what Harry Potter did, the writer decides that before he gets to you. So Harry Potter does what Harry Potter does. Whereas in our stuff, we allow movement in the story for the player to make those moral decisions, whatever, and maybe change the character that goes on through the thing. So what we found with the writers we've worked with for film, we've had to advise how to be games designers, how to tell a story in a non-linear way. So this editor that I showed up here, right, is called Whist. And essentially, it allows the writer to make an interactive script so we can play the script. So it's something we made to solve an issue for ourselves. So when we work with writers now, they don't just deliver us a linear script. They use Final Draft, they work in our tool and make an interactive script. We play it. We literally press play and play through the script, read the script. We teach them then rules. So obviously, as well as making decisions, they can add rules, like a game like chess. What are the rules to you a story? So in this case, for the complex, the rules the writer wanted to track was relationships. So it meant, if we have a conversation 5 times, depending on what the responses are, we can track whether we are getting on or not. So that would impact then down the line future sort of interactions, rather than just being an on, throw the water over, don't throw the water over. It's not quite as simple as just on-off decisions, the stuff we plan. So this tool now basically means that we work with film writers. We haven't got to educate them because they've got a tool to, essentially, they can make a linear script to start with, and you press play and it'd be very boring to play. But then they can add different parts of script. This actually then is the game without assets. So they're programming without them knowing, right? And naming conventions as well. So then once we get the interactive script, we can cost it, simple things like, we can't have the helicopter in here, we haven't got the budget, can we make it a bike, whatever, right? But even those things, so now we're commissioning loads of scripts in our own interactive tool, and writers are working in the way that we need to tell interactive stories. So for Lynn, the Handmaid's Tale writer, one of the team anyway for Handmaid's Tale, we didn't tell her how to write a story. We just taught her how to tell an interactive story, and this tool allowed her to experiment within that. Then, with the language of games and film, and the trip to Busan. So this was a big part of going to Busan. They wanted to know the how. So hence why Netflix invited us over as well, because with Charlie Brooker they were using something called Twine, and this is like Twine on steroids, because it wasn't good enough. We are developers, so we can make it and add to it. So because it's ours, as we go along, if it needs a feature, there's one writer using it now, Alan actually, the writer of The Bunker. We're working on something called Gamer Girl, and he wanted something really boring, like, can you make it highlight different colours? So yes, Alan, we can, because it's ours. So the tool grows then, and obviously it looks like it could be a production tool as well now to track. So obviously the actors, the director can have Whist and the script when filming, tagging off stuff and playing it, and equally then when the actors ad-lib, which in Complex they did a lot, he can update it in the Whist, and then that file they send to us, and that drives the film essentially, right? So we've sort of solved something right at the start where most tools go and are really techy and trying to make you learn the tool. We just wanted to capture what the writer was doing, who's not a good storyteller, but not necessarily a games designer.
It sounds like the lines are definitely being blurred between video games and film, and between these genres. And obviously the film industry is so well respected now, but I feel that the game industry is catching up, but it's still snubbed by a lot of people, which is what my first video game documentary on Radio 4 was about, really, whether or not they should have more respect. So do you think that people are starting to stand up now and give them the respect they need, they deserve?
Honestly, I got awarded the MBE, and as they walked out, for services to the video games industry, right? The guy in the front said to me, how cool is that? He said to me, right? You know what I mean? So, yeah, it is changing. I'm the only person in Wales ever to be recognised in the honours list for that industry. And in the UK, I'm literally one of probably 4 people that have been recognised for games. For video games. So it was important that I was in the title, actually, when I knew I was getting honoured, because they wanted to put digital or something in there, and I make video games, like me. Although, conversely then, so David Banner MBE video games, in the 90s, I'd probably rather tell people I was a dustman rather than a video games designer, because it meant I was unemployed, like, I mean, so the landscape has changed, and what you've got to realise is such a young industry, and there's new jobs being, for instance now, interactive script writer, we've just invented a new job, you know. Anybody want to apply, start learning interactive screen printing. I mean, we've invented a new job. That wasn't a job last year. For us, it's a job, and we've invented it, So, equally, YouTubers and stuff we use a lot as well. YouTubing is a job. Twitch streaming can be a job, but they weren't vocations 5-6 years ago. So the great thing about video games and the business model of video games is that I started in '95 when it was Mega Drive, right? PlayStation was just called PlayStation, or PlayStation 1, 2, 3. It was just called PlayStation because they didn't know if there was going to be another one, right? So the games industry is really good at, it's got to move because technology makes it move. So then the business model as well, we're really great at adapting. And because we got a foot in film now, the business model of film hasn't really changed in a long time. Whereas games, the business model, and we've blown out the water with what we're doing, we literally make and sell our own games. And we're based in Pencoed in Bridgend, and we've sold millions of games, and we've become the leading of our field in the world, right? So we're not in LA, and we're not in London, we haven't got a massive budget. So, that's because of technology enabling us to change the goalposts and change, the gatekeepers, essentially, right? So, with that then comes more respect for the games, because like you said, it does generate more than the film industry in the world, right? But what's happened is that, so it's different now, it's a generation thing, right? So what you have is, even my age now, I've got kids now, right? I grew up playing games, right? My kids are playing games. Funny thing is though now, my mother-in-law is playing games, she plays Candy Crush, right? But I won't call her a hardcore gamer, right? But she is playing it. So really, we're all playing games now, right? But as an art form, all art forms over generations, over the history, have always been targeted, right? In the 50s, it was comic books. They were the thing that was corrupting youth, right? That the governments wanted to ban, right? And then we know it was books at one time, right? But equally, right, so video games, what I get a lot, right, over the years, and it's like, oh, it's not. It's like, if I meet somebody, whatever a gamer means, right, or somebody that has seen no value in playing games at any point in their life, they'll say to me, I'll say, oh, what do you do? I say, oh, I make games, and they'll say, oh, Tetris, Pac-Man, oh, my kids love games and whatever. And then they say, I said, oh, you can have, so I'll send you some of my games. Oh, I'm going to play some of my kids tonight. I said, how old's your kid? Oh, they're 10. I said, don't play that. That's an 18. Like, do you mean? Because we make games for all ages. So it'd be foolish if I said to you, I wrote books, and you assumed all the books I wrote were for kids. That'd be ridiculous, wouldn't it? And if I said I made films, and you thought films were for kids, and films can be for kids, adults, and everything in between. So as an art form, games can be for any audience. And in fact, the games we make now are not for kids. They're 18 plus. They're for big kids. So people are getting more savvy about that. There's lots of different genres in games. And what games are. They're not all console games. There's mobile, browser, casual games, and whatever. So that art form is growing, and people will understand that more. Like they understand there are many different types of books, there are many different types of film. And music as well. We sort of understand those as art forms. So at the moment, I suppose games are still suffering from the fact that there was a time where games were only for kids because adults bought the tech for their kids to use, and they were not interested in playing whatever childish game was on there. And now games are not necessarily childish, for all ages.
Right, definitely are. You have been quoted by saying companies do not need to set up in cities any longer, and you're proof of that because you're set up in Pencoed. And Tim Schafer actually said to me as well when I was asking him to do a little report for Newsround, I said, what would your advice be to kids who want to make games? And he said, anyone can make games. You can make a game. You can just go into your room now and download Roblox or whatever it is that you want to use, and just make a game. And so, would you agree that it's still the case? And do you think more people are realizing it now that anybody can make a game?
Yeah. So, so now there's a lot more, the internet is a brilliant resource for learning. So that even if you're doing a course, or even if you're a young kid, it's easy to sort of learn by literally just going online and watching, really, right? But yeah, so with the online platforms, you can not just only if you make something, you can get it to a mass market now. So it really, the conversation has changed from not just getting to market. It's more like there's too much stuff. There's, you're lost in the noise of the fact, we could all have our own YouTube channel. Doesn't necessarily mean if we did it as a hobby, that'd be great. Some people do levitate and make lots of money out of it, but we can all set up a YouTube channel and have our own TV channel to broadcast the people, right? So what we tend to do when we started the company with no fans, nobody knew about us, was to find our audience. Rather than worrying about other people's audience, trying to find our audience. And then I would start by literally the storefronts we got to, the shows we went to, the people we met, building your audience. When you went from 10 people who bought our games to 100 people who bought our games to, in the stage where we are now. But then location-wise, I can tell you now, right, we've literally been, me and Rich have been round the world, right? In fact, I've spent more time in hotel rooms with him and my wife, right, over the last 7 years, right? We've been to Tokyo Game Show, Cologne, San Francisco, Seattle. Obviously, we just come back from Seoul and Busan. We didn't just go to Busan. And then we've literally been around the world, right? And in each of those different shows, they're not all the same people. You see the Japanese and the Asian indie games development scene. In Cologne, you're going to see, again, the European and even like the German indie scene, right? And there are crossovers, yeah, we see similar people around, but you've got to realise in every country, everybody's got a scene, right? And what you'll find now, most of these people tend not to be based in big cities. If our next game is out on December the 3rd, and it's called Simulacra. And it's not, we didn't design it, it was a Malaysian team. Yeah, and they say only in English though, which blew my mind. It's like, why haven't we done it in your own language? It's like so that just shows you, that's just an odd, they're based not even in Taipei, they're based out in the sticks. But I mean, it's just because the world's more connected now, obviously via the internet and social media. So location is more about if you've got the infrastructure, have you got an internet connection? So luckily we have in Pencoed. It's not the best, but we have got one. And the reality of it is, it's probably better not to be in a city. When we started, Wales, it's a thing I think we all have. We're all like sort of tribal and whatever, and we just assume when we're from an area, everything's rubbish. Do you know what I mean? So that's the thing. Everything's better somewhere else. Like, do you mean? And then Rich, my business partner, is not even Welsh, right? Because he says I'm Welsh enough for both of us, right? So he's from Devon, right? And I had to persuade him, and he didn't take much persuading him. We call Wales Interactive, and he said, why? I said, we can own Wales. Like, do you mean? Can you imagine being the first? There's no games companies. It's an easy win. If we can make at least 1 or 2 games that people might know about, we'll be known as the rock star of Wales already, because there's nothing set the precedent, right? So luckily that happened, but we continue to work hard on that. And our games are known actually more outside of Wales than in Wales, right? But the boring thing about where we're based is, because we're based outside of Cardiff, essentially, right, on the M4 in the Sony building, when everybody's going into Cardiff, my team are coming out of Cardiff. We've got like 1 million parking spaces. You can park sideways, right? We've got a canteen on site, which we haven't got to pay because it's subsidised by Sony, and a gym, which I only use for the free water, right? And then, but what that means is, stress-wise, it's, the environment you're in, right? And I used to work in London. Basically in London, it seemed to take an hour to go anywhere, even if it was just over there. It's like, it's only 10 minutes over there, and it'd be, it would take an hour, right? You don't even know why it would take an hour, but it would take an hour, right? So, I mean, that stress in your day, my team haven't got that stress, right? And another important thing, which is not just about location, is that there's a misconception in the creative industries or in games. We burn the candle. We're always on the crunch, right? My team don't do weekends. We don't work late. I won't let them work late, and I won't let them work weekends. Because we publish our own games, if it's all going wrong on a Friday, we all go home, and then we come back on Monday, and then, because luckily we're not like medics or doctors and got proper jobs. We make stuff to entertain the world, great, but equally, if my team are happy, if we are happy as a unit, right, it's so much easier, and that's proof. The proof of that is we've made 30 titles in 7 years, more than any. Do you know the big companies you're talking about? More than any of those, right? Because people, our team love what they do, and they like the environment that we've set up, so that it's not pressure. It's about expressing yourself, trying to be the best. Why not try to take on the big guys? And our games are next to the big guys. Why not? Because you just don't want to be mediocre. So the logo which I designed, this little dragon, which is an obvious thing to do, right? Because I just basically, me and Rich wanted something to look cool in metal, like a car badge, right? And it does. It's the flattering thing is, right, we go around the world now, and without the words, people come over to us and go, and are you Wales Interactive? And that, just shows you add value to whatever you want to call yourself, even if it's, I don't know, monkey, banana games, or whatever you want to call yourself, right? It's your actions which add value to that, not the name really, right? But what we saw was a value in the Wales brand, because we thought that was, why not put Wales on the map? And to be honest, lifestyle-wise as well, they always say in California you can go on the beach in the morning and snowboard in the afternoon. Nobody does, but you can, right? So equally, you can go to Porthcawl in Corley Island in the thing, and whatever. You know what I mean? It's like we've got for such a small country, we've got such a rich vista of different locations and whatever. So it's lifestyle thing as well. It's a no-brainer, to base it, because again, the more chilled you are, yes, we work hard, but I mean, essentially, at the end of the day, if the individuals in our team are not happy, then it's harder to be successful. Do you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Speaking of keeping your workforce happy, just to let you know that over in California, Blizzard actually lets people bring their dogs to work. I think that is amazing. We were just walking through the corridors, and they had, baby gates.
Yeah.
They had some across the offices just so that their dogs couldn't run off. And I was just thinking, I'd love the BBC to do this. But I doubt it's going to happen anytime soon. You've also created some games in Welsh. So what's the demand like for games in minority languages? Right,
so we actually made the first ever Welsh language console game, and it was Master Reboot, and I remember this, a Naid Coll in Welsh, right, which is Lost Soul, right? So we worked then, we wrote the game, and we worked then with S4C, a script writer they had, and he adapted it, because obviously it's not a straight translation. So we worked to adapt it then, and it was the first Welsh language console games. It was out on PlayStation back in 2013, I'm going to say, right? And that, I mean, sales-wise, obviously it is very minority, right? But the important thing about that is about localization, right? So our success has been supporting languages, not just the mainstream languages. For instance, late shifts in Hebrew, right? Because somebody asked for it, and they actually translated it for us for nothing. So we said, yeah, we'll put it in, right? So, I mean, our success has been supporting lots of languages, even minority ones. So, actually, I'll show you this a minute, right? So, Made a Scare. So, Made a Scare is actually, again, is heavily, lots of Welsh culture in this one. So there's not Welsh all the way throughout, but Welsh features heavily in the form of hymns, so Calan Lan, Swagan, Ar Hyd yn Nos. And they're key to the story, actually, because the game is sound-based. It's all about singing.
Beasts pursuing.
So obviously this is not interacting with, this is real-time 3D, so this is all done in-house with my in-house team.
Intent on seeing our demise.
So there's a mix of language. It's mostly English-driven, but there is a lot of Welsh culture with
will consenting.
It's not a rom-com, it's a horror.
Of a scare shall be my prize.
So this still uses the whisk tool I showed you, which was for interacting with. This is used in this as well, because this in the interaction parts of this game, we use whisk to tell parts of it as well. So if I quickly flick to this, it takes about 30 seconds to get to the Welsh audio. So actually, so Gareth Lum, our musician and audio engineer, he's been working with us for 5 years. He's actually from Carmarthen, so. So essentially, when we come up with the idea for Made to Scare back in 2017, me and Rich just researched, really wanted to do a horror game, what Welsh sort of stories were around, and then basically this is based literally down the road from us in Bridgend in a place called Scare House. Was the original thing, and we've adapted the story and sort of moved the location a little bit. And we've got the creepiest version of Callan Lan ever running through it. So it's really haunting, but I mean, in a horror game, it's amazing, right? So we've got this great singer who's also from Carmarthen, and Tierra Davis, and she's recorded quite a few hymns which we've done our own arrangements on, and they sort of drive the game, the atmosphere of the game all the way through it. And we thought it's quite interesting to throw Callan Lan at a horror game, you know, so the contrast of that. So it's really haunting, the game is. So the Welsh language, funny thing is, when we test this, obviously, when we test outside of Wales, they think it's Elvish or something. So it's quite nice to me, so as if we've invented a language. And then the lyrics of Callan Lan and even Suagan, they reflect some of the story that's going on. So we use those songs then to sort of bounce off in the story we tell.
That was beautiful. And I just think it's such a shame with video games that so many people are missing out on beautiful music like that, or beautiful versions of beautiful music like that. And do you think that's sad? I mean, I know like on Radio 3 and Classic FM now, they've got some more video game music, but like there's so many classical music fans that would love some of the music that's in games. Yeah,
so, well, actually this will be, so there's a National Video Game Orchestra of Wales, right? They did a gig back in the summer, actually, in the actual college there, right, in the big auditorium they got there. So they play music from games. So they'll actually be doing a gig with some of Made to Scare's music on a full orchestral arrangement, which is like, you know, really cool, you know, just showing again the ambition of what we're doing is not, you know, is not small scale. But yeah, you're right. The frustration I have got with any of the media, right, is I listen to the radio, right, and there's always somebody on there. You know if they're on there, if it's an actor or a singer or whatever, or a presenter, they're selling their book, their film, whatever, right? Games, you never have anybody get invited on there going, oh, hey, Dai, what are you doing? Oh, this is my new game, Made to Scare. It's out, and you know, because we are not celebrities, we are not interesting to talk to, because, you know, Charlie Brooker, in fact, we were in the BAFTAs with him, right? So we've done the most successful one. That's a fact. The Bandersnatch is different because Netflix curate, they push it on the front of the store. It wasn't. Ours was done by natural, organic, finding an audience and it being the best and it floating to the top, right? But equally, that was in December. So all you heard was Bandersnatch, and he was on lots of radio interviews talking about how they invented interactive movies and games, right? So the games industry doesn't really get that chance because even though we're in categories now in the BAFTAs, it's an uneven playing field because you hear the music in the air and the visuals in here and the story of how we make those, right? It's interesting. But because I suppose actors are key to that normally, and you get the actor that's in that to come and that's the interest, right? Or even because Charlie Brooker now has become a well-known writer. So the reason we got the Handmaid's Tale writer involved is because of that, because it was really sad, but we had to get somebody involved so they've heard of them. So I mean, that's bad, isn't it, really? Because so that should change in the media. That why, you know, assuming your audience doesn't play games, whereas if you I'm going to give my age here. I'm 47, right? So most people now up to their 50s will be game players and buy games, right? So that should be also on that. I'm not asking to be on the Graham Norton couch because I'm not charismatic enough, but you know what I mean? That should be on. If people are on there selling their music and they're selling their films and they're selling this and they're selling that, you know, it's like, it's just weird that games are not in that conversation, right? And it's probably because it's actor-led or star-led. And at the moment, yeah, the last thing I would want is to get a well-known name in our game because we'd have to share loads of money with that, and I want to hire people from Wales and make a living, do you know what I mean? So it's a weird thing that the industry is that sort of thing, you know, whereas, you know, it should really be about the art form and the fact, you know, celebrating that, you know, in the UK there's lots of amazing games that get made all the time, but I think only Fortnite's really ever broken through to mainstream media in a non-negative way. There was like a Fortnite story when they deleted their game, because normally game stories are about loot boxes, and you know, every time somebody phones us, it's not about our game, it's about, oh, what's your opinion on loot boxes? I don't know, we don't do loot boxes. it's like assuming like we all work in that way. So Fortnite, weirdly, is the only one that's really properly broken. I don't mean there's films have been made out of games like Tomb Raider, but I mean, it's actually in my Sky app, Fortnite is, as a news story when it got taken down. And it was in my Sky app this week when the YouTuber, a well-known YouTuber who plays Fortnite, cheated, right? So it is coming in a non-negative way, but it still as an art form at the moment. It's not in mainstream media celebrated enough, I don't think.
No, totally agree with you. No, I'm excited to know what you think about this, because as a hardcore gamer, and I think I got my interest in gaming from my uncles, three of us believe that now games are getting easier. And I don't know if it's because you're trying to appeal to new audiences who, you know, like social media and don't have any time or any patience to really invest in a game. But I mean, what are your thoughts on our games getting easier?
So I've made over 50 games in 25 years, right? So as a young 22-year-old locked in a room in London, and you think, so I came from Ian Livingstone, the godfather of video games in the UK, was my first boss, right? And you think that there was like a massive plan, they'd come in and they'd go, we're going to make this and it's going to be this and it's going to that. They'd open the door, go, so there'd be three of us in a room, me and a programmer and another artist, and they'd go, make something, and then they go away then. And we go, what should we make? Should we make a car game or football game? So I mean, the early games industry was basically driven by young guys making what they wanted, right? And then the reality of it is, when you're making a game, you put all your energy into it and whatever, and sometimes you literally run out of time to finish it. So we used to make it so hard, the difficulty curve, that you could never get to the end of it. And that was the truth, you know, then. It was like, if you ever got to the end, it just would say, congratulations, because we literally run out of money, budget and everything. So we make the difficulty curve so hard that people would exit the game. They would still play it for a long time, but they would never really get to the end, right?
That's how I played. There were so many games I've never finished.
Yeah, so if you played my old back catalogue of games, they'd be solid, right? And then now audiences have changed, and it's not just, it's more sophisticated. So the games are still male-dominated, but that's not to do with the courses or a lack of will. It's more to do with the fact that there was a generation growing up just thinking, you know, basically making games is for geeky blokes. Do you mean? So that's changing now anyway, right? But the courses are very diverse. The courses, you know, 50-50 male, female of the games courses in University of South Wales, right? It's not like, but it tends to be then, the vocations tend to be a lot of women go into animation and film, not into games from those courses. So that's more to do with a change in mindset. And now more and more women are playing games. They have a voice to make them. So the people making games now is very diverse, so it's becoming more sophisticated, and the audience is more sophisticated. And equally, if you make something too hard, you could literally, can you imagine, you know, you think of films, never ever seeing, you're only watching 10 minutes of film and all that money wasted. Mm-hmm. So as developers, we try to want you to experience as much of it as possible. So there will be a difficulty curve, but equally, it can be adjusted real time on what the player's doing. it can react. You know, if they're really sort of not winning, we can make them win as such, right? So yeah, I would say that has become. I think it's more that we are more aware now that we want the games to be more open to more people playing them. So Fortnite was just an update and made it really easy to win, because I was rubbish at Fortnite. So I'm like half decent now because my kids are running around me. I'm like the medic for my kids, right? So I'm like a parent in the game, a virtual parent and a real parent. But yeah, so they've made it easier because they want more people to go in and play their game and feel like they're winning. Nobody wants to play in a game where you feel like you're losing constantly. So that thing about winning and losing as a games maker is a fine line, because we want people to fail and try again, but equally you don't want them to lose interest and turn off the game and never come back to it, you know.
Fair enough. Well, I think we're running out of time here, so I'm going to ask you one quick question before you open up to the audience. So where next for you and Wales Interactive?
So we've got our most busiest year next year. So we've got The Complex, which is our next interactive movie, which is just in post-production. We get the final files in 2 weeks.
There's only one player left. What are you going to do?
Make a decision.
I showed you Whist. We could play this a year ago. Do you know what I mean? Without the visuals.
So urgently.
I don't have to worry about what it plays like, because I know it's just visually now. There's stuff in the place where the script was.
We can't risk a bug getting into the city.
We've never seen anything like it.
Kensington wants my expertise again.
Well, Shirley has my expertise.
She'd be sacrificing herself to save millions.
I'm not a murderer.
So the business model with this is quite interesting, because we can publish
Hacking.
on console, PC, all around the world.
We need to cooperate with
The byproduct is a linear cut film, so Netflix talking to us about, you know, we can actually sell a film as well, you know, which is
I'm going to save you.
from one of the 7 endings that we have in the film. We can choose what the director's cut is.
This is how scientists get
So
killed.
business model-wise, the film is a byproduct, not a game.
Time is running out. Deal or no deal?
We need to start making better decisions.
This is like, we haven't actually showed this to anybody, so this is placeholder footage. It's not in public domain yet, so I sort of drop it in for
Every single choice along the way counts.
So it's a sci-fi thriller, obviously. But it's still a choose-your-own-adventure, right? Using Whist and working with different production partners for that one. Then Made a Scare, you've seen. That is a real-time horror game based, you know, on Welsh culture. We've got another 2 films in different stages of production. So one is called Gamer Girl. They're actually filming that now. They go to shows to film that, so everybody thinks she's a real streamer. But that is so we talk about FMV and interactive movie, right? So the way I define both of them are: The Bunker was an FMV, Gamer Girl's an FMV, Complex is interactive movie, Late Shift's an interactive movie. Why do I know they are? Because basically, Late Shift and Complex, mechanically, if the story moves, if you don't make a decision, we'll make one for you. And you haven't got to be a gamer to play it, you just got to be interested in the film and making decisions, right? But if you don't make a decision, we'll make one for you. And equally, you can play collectively with a mixer app, and you could play with your mates, or even just shouting it on thing, click, get them, whatever, run, right? So that is an interactive movie, right? And you will get to an ending, not always the same ending. Something like The Bunker is an FMV because you actually point and click, you use game sort of mechanics to move around the screen. So that's a bit more gamey, and basically a bit more of a higher level of entry for, you've got to be somebody who's used to using a joypad or a mouse, I suppose, right, to play games, right? And that's the same as Gamer Girl, because it's essentially, because she's a streamer, you're managing her stream, and even though it's a horror, basically there's a stalker, and you're trying to moderate her stream, which changes the story of her stream, essentially. So even though it's using film, those two are more FMV, they're proper game mechanics, whereas the interactive movies like, Bandersnatch, Late Shift, and now The Complex are basically for everybody. You don't have to be a gamer to understand or enjoy them, you know.
Well, thank you. I think that's all we have time for. Diolch yn fawr iawn, Dai. Thank you very much for joining us. I hope you've enjoyed it. Just a couple of things to mention before I leave you. So, as I mentioned at the beginning, mae'r digwyddiad heno yn rhan o arlwy hwb menter ffocws Caerfyrddin. Mae'r hwb yn cynnig cyngor busnes am ddim a nifer o weithdai a sgyrsiau yn ogystal a gofod cydweithio gyda hot desks. So, as I mentioned at the start, this event tonight is delivered as part of the Focus Carmarthen Enterprise Hub funded by the Welsh Government with support of the European Regional Development Fund. Thank you once again for joining us. I think we can go out and play some games now, but please give a warm round of applause to Dai Banner. Diolch yn fawr.
Thanks for coming.